An adult child just got on TikTok and said something that every estranged parent has been screaming for years. And nobody clapped for her. Nobody put it on a t shirt. Nobody made it go viral the way the cut them off videos go viral. But I saw it. And I need every estranged parent watching this to hear exactly what she said because this changes the conversation. Stay with me. Before I play this clip, I want to set the table for you because context matters here. There's a creator on TikTok. Her name is Nikki. She goes by Book of Nikki. And she posted a video about firing her therapist. Now, on its own, that sounds like just another therapy take. But what she said in that video and why she fired her therapist is one of the most honest things I have heard from an adult child in this entire conversation about estrangement. And I want to be clear about something before we get into it. I'm not putting Nikki on a pedestal. I'm not using her to attack adult children broadly. What I'm doing is saying this woman had the courage and the self-awareness to say something that most people in her position never say. And that deserves to be heard. The reason that this matters is simple. For years, estranged parents have been told that their perspective is invalid. That if their child cut them off, they must have done something terrible. That the parent is always the problem. That's the narrative that dominates every platform, every therapy office, every comment section. Nikki just cracked that narrative wide open. Let me show you what she said.
I fired my therapist because she always agreed with me. I think so many forget that therapists make money on every visit, and it doesn't matter if the visit is free to you. They're getting paid by somebody, whether it's your insurance or program or whatever. And if your therapist is always agreeing with you, then they're in it for the money and that's it. And you'll never change my mind about that. Someone made a comment on one of my no contact videos stating that their therapist agreed with them and their decision, so therefore they were right. That's not true at all. And the whole thing with this whole no contact topic is such a big deal in America. But I'll say this. I will say that if your parent disagreed with you and your decisions that you were making and you went no contact, that's on you. That's not bad parenting. That's not abusive behavior. That is a parent who is providing constructive criticism to their child and efforts of trying to prevent them from making mistakes that maybe they had made in the past. See, that's another thing. I think that we live in such a weak-minded society. A lot of these kids, young adult children, are so entitled and enabled that they honestly cannot take constructive criticism at all. And like I said, and I've said it a million times, but some of you guys still come at me in my comments, and that's fine, but this is not for everyone. I'm not meaning this towards everyone. I have 2 forms of going no contact situations in my life. I have gone no contact with a sibling who essayed me. That is a forever bond that has been broken. I will never be in communication or contact with that sibling ever again. Okay? But going no contact with my mother is different because my mother never directly did anything wrong to me. I was just raised by a grandparent who made me believe that my mom was a horrible person. And somebody asked me what my mother could have done better to maybe save the relationship. My mom fought so hard for us when she was younger, when we were younger, but the comments that I get about, well, your mom should have done more or whatever, most of the time the judge sides with the mother. Not in my case, because my grandfather was the sheriff and my grandmother worked alongside of the judge in that town. My dad's family had a lot of power, a lot of pull, and a lot of money to deal with it. My mother did not. My mother didn't have a support system. My mother tried. And my dad was a very dangerous man. My dad was a very dangerous man. And so my mother feared for her life, and she feared for the life of her kids. And I do not hold that against her. Later on in life, do I wish she would have came to me and told me that my father was not my biological father? Absolutely, I do. Do I wish that she would have told me the truth about what happened when I was a child? Absolutely, I do. But I think that my mother had already spiraled out of control into her depression and her poor decision making, that she wasn't the same woman she was whenever she lost her children. So many kids are going no contact because parents are not siding with them on the decisions that they're making for their lives. I'm telling you, I am not the friend parent to my children. I am the mother. I will never be my children's friend in the sense of, okay, it's okay for them to make poor decisions. I am not an enabling parent, and I never will be, because I watched my grandmother enable my brothers, and now I am the only one left living because of that. I've watched my ex-husband's mother enable his siblings, his brothers, who one of them have passed away because of enablement. I watched her give her entire life savings, 401k, to bailing her sons out of trouble over and over again, to where she's left with nothing and one of them is left 6 feet under. I'm not an enabling parent, and some of you grown children are upset that your parents no longer enable you. They've cut you off. And so that is your pull. You pull this whole no contact, pulling them away from your grandchildren, their grandchildren, pulling them away from you just because you don't agree with them no longer providing for you. And that's my take on this. Some people have asked me, well, why haven't I worked it out? My mother's deceased. The grandmother who was my non-biological grandmother, she knew I was not her grandchild, which explains why I was the only one of 3 children who received abuse, because she knew that excuse me, she knew that I was not her blood. The only reason why my grandmother kept me away from my mother was for the money that she was making, because my father was murdered when I was 9 years old. Okay? And the money that she was receiving for each of us children was enough for her to keep me away from my mother. It was all about financial. And honestly, I think a lot of it had to do with her wanting my mother to suffer, because they never got along. If you were abused by your parent, of course, I understand the no contact. But if you're doing it out of spite, because your parents aren't enabling you or enabling your habits or your decisions, then it's on you, and you will pay for that price one day. Much love.
You hear that? She fired her therapist, not because the therapist was wrong, not because the therapist gave her bad advice. She fired her therapist because the therapist agreed with everything she said. Every single thing. No pushback, no challenge, no, well, let's look at this from another angle. Just, yes, you're right. They're wrong. You're valid. Keep going. And Nikki, to her credit, recognized that as a problem. She recognized that as a therapist who only tells you what you want to hear is not healing you. They are enabling you. There's a massive difference between those two things. And then she said it. She said, if your parents don't agree with your bad behavior, that's not trauma. That's parenting. I'm going to say that one more time for the people in the back. I need every parent watching this to let this land and understand it. If you are a parent and you do not agree with your adult children or your children's bad behavior, that's not trauma. That's parenting. That is an adult child saying what estranged parents have been trying to say for years while being talked over, dismissed, and labeled toxic for saying it. Now, let me talk about what Nikki identified, because she put her finger on something that is genuinely damaging families across the country right now. There's a version of therapy that's become less about healing and more about validation. And I want to be careful here, because I'm not talking about all therapists. There are genuinely good therapists doing important work that's real, 100%. But there's a specific type of therapist approach that has exploded in popularity over the last decade. And it works like this. The client comes in. The therapist validates the story. The client feels good. The client comes back. The therapist gets paid. See how that works? What that model does not do is challenge the client's narrative. It does not ask hard questions. It does not say, have you considered that you might be contributing to this dynamic? It does not say, is it possible your parents were doing their best with what they had? Because that's uncomfortable. That might make the client leave. And when your business model depends on people coming back every week, uncomfortable is bad for business. What Nikki recognized, and this is what makes her video remarkable, is that she was sitting in a room with someone who was supposed to be helping her heal, and instead was helping her build a stronger case for staying stuck. Because here's the truth about estrangement that nobody in the therapy industry wants to say. Estrangement is rarely the end of suffering. For most people, it is the beginning of a different kind of suffering. The relief is real at first. The distance feels like peace. But what follows is complicated. Guilt, grief, identity questions, holidays that feel hollow, milestones with empty chairs on both sides of the table. A therapist whose only job is to validate the estrangement never has to deal with that second chapter. By the time that chapter starts, the client has often moved on to a new therapist or stopped going entirely. The damage is done. The family is fractured and nobody is held accountable for the role that validation only the therapy played in getting there, right? I want to spend some time on this specific line because I think it is the most important thing said about estrangement in a long time. If your parents don't agree with your bad behavior, that's not trauma. That's parenting. Let's unpack that. Because what Nikki is identifying as a confusion that has become an epidemic, the confusion between discomfort and trauma, between boundaries and abuse, between a parent doing their job and a parent being toxic. Every parent sets limits. Every parent at some point tells their child something they don't want to hear. Every parent, if they're doing it right, refuses to co-sign behavior that they know is destructive. That is not trauma. That is love with a spine. But somewhere along the way, and social media accelerated this dramatically, the experience of a parent saying no became reframed as emotional damage. A parent who had expectation becomes controlling. A parent who expressed disappointment became emotionally abusive. A parent who held a value the child didn't share became toxic. And the child, armed with therapy language validated by an algorithm that rewards estrangement stories, supported by a therapist who never pushed back, made a decision, cut them off, and protect your peace. And now that parent is sitting at home, blocked on every platform, missing birthdays, missing holidays, maybe missing the birth of a grandchild, wondering what they did was so unforgivable. What did they do? Here's what I want to say to every parent watching this. What Nikki said gives language to what you already knew in your gut. You are not abusive for having standards. You are not toxic for disagreeing. You were not a monster for being human and imperfect and still trying. The fact that your child experienced discomfort in your home does not automatically mean you caused trauma. Parenting is supposed to involve discomfort sometimes. That discomfort is how children learn that the world does not bend to their every desire. That lesson, as uncomfortable as it is to teach and to receive, and one of the most important gifts a parent can give. And if your child reframed that gift as a damage, that is a tragedy. But it is not evidence that you are the person they made you out to be. So let me bring this home, because I didn't make this video just to react to a TikTok. I made this video because of the parents watching it. The parents who have been called toxic so many times, they start to believe it. The parents who have done years of therapy, trying to figure out what they did wrong while their child did years of therapy being told they were right. The parent who have written letters, left voicemail, sent texts into silence, genuinely trying to understand, genuinely trying to take accountability, genuinely asking themselves the hard questions. Nikki gave you something today. She gave you a data point from inside the room you were never allowed into. She sat in the room where your child and their therapist talked about you, and she told you what it can look like. A therapist agreeing with everything. No challenge, no balance, no let's hear your parents' perspective. Just yes, you are right. They are the problem. Protect yourself. And she recognized it as wrong. That doesn't mean your situation is identical to hers. That doesn't mean your child's therapist is the same. Every situation is its own thing. I know that. But what it does mean is this: the narrative that has dominated this conversation, the one that says the adult child is always right, the parent is always the problem, and estrangement is always healing, that narrative has cracks in it, real ones, coming from inside. And every estranged parent who has felt gaslit by the narrative, who has felt like the entire world decided you were guilty before you could say a word, you were not imagining it. The system was not balanced. The conversation was not fair. You deserve better than that. You still do. You keep doing the work. Keep asking the hard questions. Keep being honest with yourself, but stop accepting a verdict that was delivered without a fair trial. I want to hear from you in the comments. I got 2 questions for you guys. The first question is, does what Nikki said match what you believe happened in your situation? Did therapy play a role in your estrangement? Tell me your experience. The second question is, to any adult children watching this, I'm not your enemy. I'm not saying your pain isn't real. I'm saying the conversation deserves more honesty than it's been getting. If Nikki video hits you the way it hit me, drop a comment. I want to hear from you too. Share this video, not for me. Share it because there's a parent out there right now who is in the middle of blaming themselves for something they are seeing from a completely one-sided angle. This video might be the thing that shifts it for them.